Alright, so where do I start? I guess we'll start at the beginning. So these individuals have kept me up all night again. I had a couple hours of sleep in the late afternoon yesterday. Um, when the harassment dies down, I believe it's due to the amount of traffic nearby. But I'm going to do this documentary real quick about some different stuff that kind of walks through everything I've been talking about with some additional stuff at the end. In 2003, in boot camp, Marine Corps boot camp, they asked me if I wanted all four of my wisdom teeth pulled, and I said yes. I didn't think it was an option otherwise. So they went in and pulled all four of my wisdom teeth, and as I was falling asleep under anesthesia, and I could feel them starting to break off the wisdom teeth. And then I started to come to, and I saw a doorway above me as they were appeared to be wheeling me back in to the room that we were in. I distinctly remember a door because as you're laying down with your head facing up, you can see a doorway um, as you're going through it. I remember seeing a doorway momentarily before I passed back out, and then I woke back up to a whole bunch of people standing over the top of me. This was 2003, July 2003. Whole bunch of weird stuff and whatnot has happened throughout my military career. Started out as infantry rifleman, where I worked at the strategic weapons facility. The nuclear facility is the easiest way to put it. And then after that, I went to the infantry unit. Went overseas, which I cover this in other audios and videos. And then I went to special operations because originally I was thinking about getting out after my first enlistment and going join the French Foreign Legion. And then they created MARSOC, which was the part of it was Foreign Military Training Unit, which was set up just like the French Foreign Legion. So I decided to stay in and go try out that unit. So I stayed in, did that for 8.5 more years, and then decided to get out. A lot of stuff I've done over my time period throughout my special operations career. I started out as a communications guy. Did that for about 6 months, and they bumped me up to the intel guy because I was good at analyzing and piecing together puzzles. And I briefed a lot of generals and did a lot of briefs. Did a lot of intelligence related stuff all over the world. In CENTCOM, SouthCom, and NorthCom. During my time in special operations, in Marine special operations. And then in 2012, I believe it was April or May 2012, I identify foreign intelligence threats surveilling me around wherever I would go, which I cover elsewhere. The FBI gets told about it, and they're like, yeah, that sounds like people we're tracking. Whereas the guys I was working with from the special forces teams, they were 20 to 26 years in, did some other stuff, intelligence related, and they thought I was crazy, like I was seeing ghosts because of the way I was describing what they were doing. And the FBI was like, nope, those are real people, and yes, they really are doing that. And this was in Colorado, all over the state of Colorado where I was working at, which I'm not going to get into all the details, but it came back positive that yes, it was a foreign intelligence threat. Security industry specialist operates in that area, which is 313 on their logo, which is on the Culper Codex. 313 means an instrument. There's also 89 North that supposedly operates out of there based on someone who claims to be in 89 North and made one comment when he got upset on social media. He was like, I'm 89 North, I know what I'm talking about. And that was pretty much the end of it. I mean, he said some other stuff to another person, like, looks like we got another one. But the point is there's a lot of stuff going on there. And then I went on deployment from September 2012 to May 2013. And when I first got into Afghanistan as a technical surveillance detachment chief as an E5, which it was a chief warrant officer 2 position, or a master sergeant, depending how you look at it. As far as Army versus Marines and yada yada yada. A Army person approached me wearing an Army uniform. That's how I know he was Army, and I knew he was Task Force Orange. Approached me, and he was more like quizzing me on my knowledge to see, like, to assess me, is what he was doing. And shortly after that, if I remember correctly, it was right after that person approached me and started quizzing me on some stuff. A general and a senior enlisted guy wearing Army fatigues approached me at my location, inside my secure little compound that I was in Herat. They started asking me some questions. And then my general came and approached me because he was visiting the area and he wanted to see how everything was going. And right after that, I had a guy he was working as a contractor for DIA, but he was part of GPRU, the group that tracked Bin Laden's courier, Task Force Orange. He was working as contractor for the DIA, and he was there to quiz me on some stuff, and he was talking to some other folks and whatnot. And then we ended up going to, right when we got there, pretty much, it was like right around the time the Task Force Orange folk approached me. My computer was turning on and off by itself, my personal laptop, and my cell phone was doing some weird stuff. And then one of my colleagues' laptops, they downloaded all of his stuff and then deleted his hard drive. He had to re-image his MacBook. So that was going on in Herat. And then we get down to Bastion, and I believe it was January 2013, mid to late January. And then my cell phone's doing some more weird stuff, and it registers the London time zone. And other people are reporting weird things. And right around that same time, the British gave a fleet tracker that supposedly came into the base on a truck to a intelligence dude to give to me. And when they delivered it to me, the GPS was still on it. And I immediately unplugged the GPS. Obviously, I disconnected the power. And then I start getting calls from linguists with the London time zone on my cell phone. They start calling me. At this point in time in Bastion, I was actually on the DIA part of the NSA compound. So it's a very secure facility. Like, you have to have special access to it. And I ended up writing a report on SIPR. I sent it to some generals and CC'd my personnel on it, saying, hey, you need to know about this. I'm being targeted. This has been an ongoing incident with personal devices doing strange things the whole time. And so then we end up leaving Afghanistan, get back, and then a few months after I get back from Afghanistan, about 6 months later, I'm requested to go to Arizona to the Electronic Warfare Lab, which is also where the Human Intelligence course is for DATC. They call it DOTC, if I remember correctly. But I was requested to go there for other things. Meanwhile, I'm being followed by Army Counterintelligence, known as VISPA, which is what they were called. Follow me all over the place. And I get back to the base the next day, and I'm like, because we're staying out in a hotel, get back, and I'm like, yeah, I had some strange individuals follow me all over the place last night. And I believe this went on for a couple days. I don't remember all the details behind it. But I also remember the hotel Wi-Fi was doing some very, very strange things. So anyways, we finished that. It was like a week or two, and then go back to North Carolina. Um, some other stuff happened in 2014. And then, which I've talked about elsewhere. And then we deploy. Well, let me back up. In 2014, the house up here in Buffalo, New York was purchased in the fall of 2014. And then I deploy in early January 2015. Go overseas, do stuff, identify some folks overseas. And did some other stuff with Foreign Secret Service and whatnot. And then on the way back, or right before we departed, it was like a month maybe before we left, a couple counterintelligence dudes were like asking me if I was interested in Task Force Orange. And I said, no, I'm getting out. And they're like, they hire contractors, or they have contractors that work for them. And I'm like, no, I'm not interested. I'd also like to note that in Afghanistan, I was also asked the same question. Hey, are you interested in Task Force Orange? I was like, no. I was like, I did think about it in the past. I was like, but no, I'm not interested. I'm getting out. I'm getting out of the military. And that was 2012, the fall of 2012. I said I was not interested in Task Force Orange. So again, in 2015, a month before we depart, which was, I believe, right after July 4th, 2015, is when we departed the Middle East, SOC sent to come back to the United States. Well, a month before that, they asked me if I was interested, which I just stated. And then I get back to North Carolina, and then CIA holds a last-minute classified brief at my unit. You know, I tell my spouse I was thinking about going, and that I was going to go. And then the day they had the brief, I drove by the base. I decided I wasn't going to go to the CIA brief. And I went home, was packing up the house, painting up, you know, what needed to be painted, because we were selling the house in North Carolina. Then I get up here, or then we leave in September, late September 2015. We depart North Carolina and drive up to New York. On the way up, we stop at the Marine Corps Museum. When we stop at the hotel, first thing I say to my wife is, we're being followed. And she's like, who are they? I was like, based on the way that they're operating, they're likely federal agents. I was like, I don't know why they're following us, but they're following us. And then we stay there at night and then go to the museum and come back, or continue our route to Buffalo, New York the very next day. We get up here in Buffalo, New York, unload the house. The first thing I thought to myself when I walked in the house after we got stuff in, I had a feeling the house was bugged. Like, my sixth sense was like, there's something in this house. And then my wife and I and our son, we go for a walk around the neighborhood. There's people in the neighborhood following us all over the neighborhood. I'm like, okay, like, this is not a coincidence. A couple months later, at that point in time, our internet was also doing weird things. And then I was like, yeah, it's probably those people that were surveilling us. And I was like, it's probably a nearby tower or something that's intercepting our Wi-Fi, if I remember correctly. A couple months later, or 3 months later, CNN says a foreign government hacked Juniper Networks. And I was like, yeah, okay. Which I didn't know about that until March 2016 when I noticed Juniper Networks. I actually identified I had packet captures of it doing the activity it was doing. And then I found the article, and then I was like, yeah, okay. But anyways, a couple months after September 2015, I scanned my residence. And right around I scanned my residence, the Buffalo police contact my wife and ask, is your husband back in town? And she's like, yeah, why? She's like, oh, nothing. We were just wondering. Because they would have heard that beep as I was getting radio signals out of my wall and windowsills and whatnot in certain places in the floor. And And she told me that. She's like, yeah, they just called and asked if you were back. I was like, that's very strange, especially considering I just swept the house and found stuff in the walls. So I'm like, all right, we'll go with this. We'll see who's all involved with all this, right? So again, I knew the second I walked in there was something in the house that shouldn't have been in the house. And then going back to March 2016, I identify, or back up for a second. Right after, the whole premise behind that call from the police is they wanted me to revamp their SWAT and counter narcotics units, and asked me to fill out an application to be a cop because they couldn't hire contractors supposedly. And I was like, yeah, that's the first time I've ever heard of that. So I do all the stuff, and it's all, yeah, I believe it was ultimately like to justify what they were doing. Like, oh, this is an extended background check. And he's like, yeah, first off, I have a top secret clearance, and you don't have the authority or the clearance to monitor my location, especially knowing what I know now about this technology that's being employed against me. They had no legal authority to do so with a TSSCI clearance. So I go through the rigmarole, yada yada, fill out the paperwork, and then in March, the internet's continually falling out, and I'm like, all right, enough's enough. So I pull up my computer and I start capturing packets, and that's when I noticed the article about Juniper Networks was hacked by a foreign government. Conveniently, a few months after I initially identified it when I first got back. Well, another couple months went by. There's some other stuff that happened. Such as the CBRN facility being cased downtown, and I submitted a thing to the FBI, and then a few days later, a building shut down downtown. I identified what looked like human trafficking of some sort, and I just forwarded the details, like what I saw on like the license plate, to the East Side Police Department. I didn't give them photos at this time. I have the photos now out there. But at the time, I didn't give them photos. It just had vehicle number and description of the activity and personnel. Right around that time, I also believe surveillance started on my neighbor, who supposedly was a drug dealer, which I didn't buy it. But anyways, short while later, I document the Juniper Network some more, and then I sent it to my contact with the NSA folks, and I'm like, hey, if this is the NSA, tell them to stop playing in my backyard. Well, a couple weeks later, a Task Force Orange aircraft flies over my backyard at 300 feet AGL. It was roughly the height of the cell phone tower above the ground, directly over my backyard. So at this point, all right, I was like, I know who that is. And I just happened to walk outside, and I was walking into my backyard, and I looked up, and I see an aircraft starting to approach my backyard and fly over my backyard and continue from, I believe it was south to north. Yeah, south to north over my backyard. And then my wife comes out and is like, what was that? I was like, it's a SMU unit. I was like, they got my information about the Wi-Fi. And then going back to what I was just talking about. So then in the fall of 2016, the Buffalo police, from what I'm told, pulls off surveillance off of my neighbor, and then he ends up dead. Very strange, because the only information I provided was a description of the activity, and it had nothing to do with him. And obviously in that 2016 time frame, in June and May, I took 2 police exams, which actually I should probably get into that now. So in May, I took a police exam because I was told if I take the NFTA police exam, which is a bus police exam, it's a bus cop police exam, they could select me out of that. So I took that. In other words, it was like get on a bus and get out of town, is the way it comes across when you look back at it. And I walked out of the exam, and my wife was asking me, she was like, so how'd you do on the exam? I was like, the exam's rigged. I was like, it's a well-crafted political survey. And 2 weeks later, I end up really sick and my organs are hurting. I'm laying down on the recliner chair for like 3 days, I believe, at least 3 days, like barely eating, drinking, like just laying down. Like I was really sick. After getting out of the police exam in downtown Buffalo and then calling my wife saying how the police exam was rigged. And then I took the police exam again in late June for the Buffalo police, not the NFTA police, which is the one I got sick a couple weeks later after taking that. So I went into the Buffalo police one knowing that the exam was made by the same company, which is a foreign corporation, and I knew what to expect. Well, and then again, going back to the fall of 2016, the BPD pulls surveillance off my neighbor, and then my neighbor dies shortly after that, sometime around that time frame. And they had crime scene tape up and everything, and I was like, telling my wife, I was like, I think somebody killed our neighbor. And she's like, no, he overdosed. I was like, they wouldn't put crime scene tape up if he overdosed. And that was the first sign to me, like, nah, there's foul play here. And then after that, immediately after that, I get someone ask me, what do you know about Scientology? And I looked at him like, nothing other than people claim that they're crazy. Because that's all I knew about Scientology, right? And I know that's what people say. And I was like, other than that, no, I don't know anything about them. I was like, they're not on my radar, people I'm tracking. And then in December, I believe it was, 2016, I see who looks like the former head of the FBI Counterintelligence Division outside my residence, which I talk about in another video, filming me as I'm snowblowing the front of my house, the sidewalk area. I notice him doing it, and I just go about my business like, yeah, whatever, dude. And I keep snowblowing. And then shortly after that, my grandfather dies, and he's complaining about what I know now is this covert radio communications that they harass you with. They essentially message your head with it, like make you hear your own thoughts and like all this other silly stuff. And they, say harassing stuff to you all the time, and it makes it hard for you to think. He was in Mercy Hospital in Buffalo, New York at this time when he was complaining about having a hard time thinking, and he was like, like these. Turn off the TV. He told me turn off the TV, and then he kept like saying like the radio signals type thing is what he was insinuating, like signaling to it. He was just having a hard time getting his words. He died shortly thereafter that stuff. Which I believe what he was referencing was the satellites and telecommunications towers, because up on top of that hospital are telecommunications towers. And there's also satellites these people are using. Well, right after he passes away, me and my wife go to Skinny Atlas, which I discuss this elsewhere. And a very, very similar vehicle to what I just saw the former head of the FBI Counterintelligence Division of Buffalo driving. I saw another individual, again, which I get into in another video, following us over there. And I'm like, we're being surveilled. She's like, what do you mean we're being surveilled? And I was like, see that vehicle right there? Because we were driving through from a Tim Hortons area on a rest stop through a gas station area where the person had pulled over into the gas station area. I was like, that vehicle's following us. And we went about our way. And then I noticed other people wearing black wool coats in Skinny Atlas when we got there. They were following us everywhere. And they tried to cold bump us from a bar because it was going in the New Year's Eve. Tried to cold bump us from a bar to another location. I was like, nah, I'm not interested. It's like, first off, I don't know who you people are, and I'm with my wife, and we're gonna celebrate New Year's Eve. And anyways, there's people following us around while we're there. We're there for like a couple days, then we come back to Buffalo, New York. Skinny Atlas is in the Finger Lakes area of New York, in central New York area. And we get back here to Buffalo, New York, and within a couple weeks, I document a person wearing a CIA badge meeting with someone else I believe is associated with 89 North across the street. So I just documented it because I was like, something was suspicious about it, and then that was it. That's all I ever did with it at the time. because it was just weird. Well, a couple weeks after that, my wife calls me on the phone, frantic. She's like, someone almost ran me. I was like, what'd the vehicle look like? She described the vehicle. I was like, is it a white Solara? And she was like, yes. Because Solars are very distinct. And I was like, when you get home, I'm going to show you a video. You tell me if this is the vehicle. I was like, did you get a license plate? And she's like, no. I was like, all right, well, you tell me if this is the vehicle when you get home. I showed her the vehicle. She's like, that's the vehicle. I was like, all right. It's like, that person was wearing a CIA badge. Probably associated with all those other people that have been following us around. Then I do the police comp review. Now, a couple months prior to that, in the fall of 2016, I got a heads up from other folks that people believe the voter information was used to determine if you passed the police exam or not. So in March 2017, when I went in there, first off, they didn't give us all the information. We only got 1/3 of the information to review everything. And I told them, I was like, well, we need more information to do a proper review. And they wanted you to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Meanwhile, if you asked them any questions, they always said, oh, it's proprietary information to the company. And this is at City Hall in Buffalo. And I was like, well, I have reason to believe voter information is being used on these exams. And I don't remember if it was right after or right before, but the woman that works there in City Hall left the room, came back in, and the other person like, did you get a hold of them? And she said, yeah, she left a voicemail. And then they were talking really, really quietly at this point. I had to like read lips and listen really closely to what they were saying, just to make sure that that's what they were saying. And she was like, don't worry, I use my cell phone. I was like, why would you be worried about using your cell phone? You don't want me to foil who you just called on your cell phone? So it's all very strange. And then within a few hours, I have a surveillance vehicle sitting out front of my house, which I document. And that vehicle's been noted multiple times thereafter. And then I go through other information elsewhere. But backing up for a second, there's another person that showed up 4 days after the person with the CIA badge parking out in front of my residence. That person was seen multiple times thereafter as well, just like the guy that showed up a few hours after the police exam. These people are all working together. That individual there, or the individual operating that one vehicle 4 days after that person wearing the CIA badge, looks similar, if not the same person as a person I later identify being interested in my subject of a private investigation case involving corporate espionage about 2.5 years later. Now, there's other folks I find follow me and my spouse around, which are former federal agents and whatnot. And they're they were working with local drug dealers and local community members. I mean, I get into this stuff elsewhere. And then in the fall, there was other stuff that happened in 2017. But then in the fall of 2017, it got really bad, and my wife was complaining that she was being followed to and from work, and there's people at her work. And I was like, yeah, they're the people that have been following us. I was like, I know who you're talking about. Now, this, I believe, was right after I sent an email to a journalist talking about the Buffalo police exam and how she should look at the Buffalo police, and how she should look at the Buffalo police exam as a starting point for her investigations, because she was talking about misconduct. And I was like, I don't know about misconduct. I don't know any of that other stuff. I was like, but I do know there's something here with this police exam that's created by a foreign corporation. That email got triggered and sent overseas. And I walked through in another video how the servers were associated with Denver Tech Center, which is where Boozell and Hamilton's at. At the exchange servers, one is associated with Switzerland, another with Senegal, but the mail servers were associated with Italy and another one with Diego Garcia, which weren't the routes that the email took when it forwarded along to the IP. Like the IP address, like I started in California, it went from West Coast to East Coast, overseas, through Europe, back around, back in the United States, and then over to California again. So this was a pre-designated route that they say this is a surveillance program. So we got servers and we have a route associated with all these different entities. A couple days later, a local police officer dies in a training accident doing a dive in the local area. A high-risk dive when there's like minimal to no safety measures based on what was reported by everyone and what I was able to look through and see. Conveniently, he dies a couple days later. And the first thing I say to somebody when I start talking to them, I was like, they need to investigate that police officer's death because that's highly suspicious. Not to mention, I have a lot of surveillance on me right now, like fireflies. Like, they were all over me. It's like a hornet's nest. Like, it was bad. Like, every street had a surveillance vehicle jumping off of it onto me, and they were doing the old, rotating eye left and right on me. And all over the place. No matter where I was going, they were on me. I later noticed a couple months later, because this continued for a while, and I obviously have documented other information involving police, giving thumb drives to the cashiers, and then getting rolls of receipts and their thumb drives back. A couple months later, what was I going to say? There's a whole bunch of stuff going on that's very suspicious. Oh, yeah. I believe in 2016, it was the fall of 2016 or summer of 2016, the U.S. Marshals and local PD are looking for a fugitive at my brother's residence, which is an apartment. He lived down in one apartment, they lived in another. He said he found a USB plugged into his computer and did something strange. And then he came and told me about it, like what happened. And a couple days later, those folks came back to pick up that thumb drive. I was like, because when he told me about it, I was like, dude, that was a stay behind and you just got Trojan horsed. So again, Task Force Orange, U.S. Marshals, and local PD are known to all work together doing task forces. Now, there's other folks involved with all this silly stuff. I could sit here and go on and list out all the details, but in January 2018, the DA's office asked for my resume. This was right around the time I mentioned something about, I used to do DA work to a couple other folks, and they both looked at me like with shock. I was like, direct action? And they were like, oh, and then they went back to their normal selves. Well, the DA asked for my resume a few weeks for a $109,000 confidential investigator job. A few weeks later, they finally got back to me. He's like, oh, it's only $32,000 or a $34,000 job. You wouldn't be interested. And that was the end of the story. They just wanted my resume, which I asked through my spouse, my wife. Then there was other stuff in February 2018. And then, so if you look at my documentation I put together with a person claiming to work with the company, and when I said, yeah, there's nothing wrong with building a better mousetrap, he sat back in his chair and was like, oh, crap. And he was a digital marketing guy, and I was put in contact with him through a family member in March of 2018. I believe it was March 4th, 2018. I have email communications, whatnot, with the fella. And yeah, so they're all working together. These folks try to make it look like they're not working together, but they are. It's part of a intelligence network of persons that they roll out against you. And in March, they tried doing the whole recruitment. It's a Mickey Mouse trap. The blue team folks are Mickey Mouse traps. They set them up with something, as part of their patriotic duty, and the media plays off of it, and policymakers get to push their policies and yada yada. It's a mousetrap, in which I've documented elsewhere in fall of 2017, where I walked through in a slideshow, and how it's involved with Las Vegas. It's also involved with Sandy Hook and some other instances as well. Now, backing up from the failed recruitment stuff to, what was it, November? Something else happened in November. I can't remember. It slipped my mind just now. But there's a lot of stuff that's going on. I put a timeline together with events that have happened. I don't know if I go into it in this much detail that I've gone into. Oh yeah, December 2017. Mid-December 2017. We go to a restaurant and they do a bogus butt grab on my wife. They wanted me to fight this one guy. He was really a pawn, and what their goal was to entrap me. And I know this because the investigation I got a couple weeks later was about a very case where a guy was harassing another guy, and then a guy broke the person's jaw. And it involves all the stuff I've been talking about, which was a very suspicious case and directly involved in my KMZ. The beam of light from Luxor, which is actually Cheops Temple, goes right through my case. And I plotted on the map based on other geometrical points based on radiological signatures from the South Buffalo neighborhood. And the beam of light that's associated with the Las Vegas stuff shoots right through where the subject of my investigation worked. And it went right up to Bowmansville, Canada. Spot on the money. And it goes right through a golf hole that's in a nearby golf course. Straight through it. Hole in one. It's in my KMZ I put out there. You'd have to look through the folders to find it. But there's a lot of information in there. So a lot of it looks kind of silly, but this is the information I picked up on from them through all the little weird things that they're doing. Just the little nuanced stuff that they're doing. I'm able to put together like pieces of puzzles. And not only do I have that beam of light shooting through, which I remember I put this KMZ together in the fall of 2018. I documented a year prior direct references to Las Vegas with what looked like surveillance tradecraft initially. It goes to the whole pink hats, and those pink hats were later observed recently with a case, not my case, but another case. It's a murder case in the area involving pink hats and other folks that are implicated in a murder via this covert technology where they get the people that they don't like. Essentially, think of it, the way that these people are operating, it comes across to me as the Hunger Games. Like, they're offering these people up as tributes. I know it sounds crazy, but again, this is the type of stuff I've been talking about. When you actually sit back and look at it, you're like, okay, now this starts making sense. So there's a whole bunch of strange things. Now, these people want all sorts of information from you. They're interrogating you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365. This has been going on for years now. The local DA's office knows about it. The local police know about it. The state police know about it. The federal agencies have been duly notified in July 2018. A whole bunch of stuff. So they're looking for information such as stuff that would get you in trouble. Because you gotta remember, Indictment Orange, Task Force Orange, with the U.S. Marshals and local PD. They're directly involved in this whole incident targeting me as early as 2012. If not before that. But you gotta remember, this technology had to have been put in when I was in boot camp, because it's attached to my wisdom teeth, where the nerve in the wisdom teeth area, where the trigeminal nerve, where the wisdom teeth were removed, and all sorts of other weird stuff. So apparently these people intended on targeting people in the veteran community when they got out of the military for their benefit. Apparently, is the way it's coming across based on all the stuff that's been going on. So the stuff they want people to do things to compromise themselves. Like recently, this morning, I was thinking about Special Operations Database and Retrieval System, SODARS. And they weren't letting me sleep. They were just bing, 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 hit me left and right with this technology. Which again, I go into that telecommunications tower that's right nearby, managed by a foreign corporation. but then there's also another foreign corporation that accesses it via telecommunications purposes. That's out of Singapore. And there's satellites. They redirected air traffic over to the family residence, and those satellites up above the family residence started being employed. They put people in nearby residences to harass you with technology. So this morning I was thinking about Special Operations Database and Retrieval System, the SODARs, and how that is incorporated with military plans, such as if we ever need to go to a destabilized country or invade a country, and the type of information that you would collect for these reports, which would also include Notice of Intelligence Potentials, the NIPS, which kind of play into it a little bit, but not really. And some of the information like that I was just thinking about, and this stuff's projected all over the place. These people are aware, and again, I just listed off all the interests that are working with each other. You can look at the rest in the structure diagram that I've already put together. And these people keep you up around the clock. Like I just explained earlier, I got a couple hours of sleep yesterday afternoon, and I was up, as far as I'm aware, 48 hours before that, and then they kept me up all night. So anyway, so the SODARs is used for multiple purposes, from if we have to invade a country, to if we have to go provide humanitarian support to a country, to these human intelligence personnel, such as those under NATO that are running these Gladio Northwoods networks throughout the United States, Europe, and Asia, the ones that released the virus. They're managed by MI5 and CIA. But there are Army counterintelligence folks that also manage these things. And there's some Air Force folks involved in it. So they'll go through and pull out biographical information about people meet. So you might think you're just talking to them about normal stuff. That's what they think. But you're getting like background information, books, like that they've published, like if they have degrees, what motivates them. People who know what I'm talking about know where I'm going with this. And so there's that type of information that's used for these NATO folks, which goes through the Pentagon, Gladio Northwoods program. They call it something else. The Army counterintelligence folks I was talking about, VISPA, it's a wordplay on the Vespa, which is the Italian little motorcycle, and it goes in the whole Gladio stuff back in the 70s that was exposed, where they were doing all sorts of stuff in Europe. Well, that's being used in a more covert manner throughout the United States. A lot of these lone gunmen and terrorist attacks, not all of them, but a lot of them, if you look at them, it's this unit. And they're the blue team guys. They're the Mickey Mouse guys. They Mickey Mouse trapping. So you try to pigeonhole you and stuff. And so these biographical pieces of the report would be used for finding persons overseas and stuff that they would want to approach. And you'd also have like infrastructure, beach surveys, you name it. Like, think of anything you want to know about a country. Is the easiest way to put it. That's the type of stuff we want to know. Frequencies, hours of operation, this, that, the other. Where's shopping centers? Where's this other stuff? Like, what's the normal pattern of life for the area? In the morning, afternoon, and night. Checkpoints. All these types of things. And it goes even further than that. And it gets into the humanitarian stuff, with hospitals. Like, we have to know what the capability of hospitals are for medical treatment purposes, because if they don't have it there on site, we have to bring it with us. But it also goes into other operations that I know civil engineers, those types of folks go overseas to do as well. And I mean, I could get all the way down in the weeds on this, but at the end of the day, these people are recruiting people for the very activity that I've been experiencing. And they try to Mickey Mouse trap you into doing what they want you to do. So they'll try to expose certain information. Now, this information I just went over, this type of stuff I was just thinking about. I wasn't even saying it out loud. And they got it. I don't trust these folks. I've already reported this information, and apparently it wasn't important enough for government agencies to step in and shut them down. Because they've been doing this, as I've described throughout this video, for how long now? For a very long time. They intended on targeting me. And they didn't just target me, which is here's the problem. They went after my family. They terrified my 4-year-old toddler, which I've documented elsewhere. They threatened my spouse to both sexually do something to her and kill her. They threatened my nephew that they were going to harm his mother, who's in a wheelchair, to show me things, or they were going to harm her. They specifically said they were going to kill her. And they were communicating with him covertly with radios. Same thing with other family members. But they all deny it. They'll deny it because they don't know how to explain it and they don't want to sound crazy. But they trafficked my nephew with this technology into a local narcotics gang. And they're trying to play it off like it's some other folks doing. No. That's these folks. Because that stuff I talk about where they threatened my nephew, this was in late June 2018. And I told them the next time they tell you to do something, tell them to F off and don't do what they tell you to do. Because they're going to try to get you in trouble. Because I heard them tell him that. And then he showed me the rolled up gum wrappers that look like BBs. Well, a month later, I reported everything to these DHS, FBI, NSA, and I believe CIA at the time. I don't remember exactly if it was the CIA in July. It might have been right after. They stuck me in the hospital the first time on false pretenses. But they were telling my nephew to run away from home and all this other. I know what they were doing. Like, he was fine up until the point when we started getting maliciously targeted. And these agents aren't going to run around saying that they didn't do it because they're fraudulent at this point. They might have badges and legal degrees hanging on their walls, but they're fraudulent. I have the DA's office when I tell them about, I'll be getting into telling them how I believe that both my grandmothers were covertly killed by these folks, and they were terrorizing my son and threatening my nephew. I was getting into that information when the prosecutor was like, well, it's a term of endearment. When I said they call it organized group stalking. Or excuse me, they call it gang stalking, but the DOJ tracks as organized group stalking. He's like, well, that's a term of endearment. And I was like, oh, really? Is that what you say is a term of endearment? Covertly kill 2 of your family members, terrorize your 4-year-old, and then threaten your teenage nephew to do something, or they're going to harm your wheelchair-bound mother? But this is the type of stuff I've been dealing with up here. And it's all over, as far as I'm aware, it goes to at least Syracuse, New York, which I have other videos of where I walk through some of the stuff. So these folks are running around targeting people, benefiting off of your information. Because again, some of my information has assisted identifying, based on articles and stuff that have been put out there. I read them using my methodologies and whatnot to ID people that were leaking information from the National Security Council. And then something happened with the ODNI, Dan Coates, which I told him, I kept coming across Dan Coates in fall of 2018 and the fall of 2019. But I kept saying, I kept coming across Dan Coates, but I was like, I'm not sure if it's the first name's Coates or Dan, but the last name's Coates. There might be another one named Coates as well. And then that's when all that stuff came undone. But they used my methodology that I used to identify the shadow brokers, which were PhD educated personnel that were educated in the British education system. Yada, yada, yada. The shadow brokers stole NSA exploits and were selling them on the black market, if anyone remembers that incident. So again, we have a foreign corporation managed by British intelligence putting in people in the area here, managing corporations that do telecom stuff and banking stuff and publishing stuff and medical stuff. And last year in June 2019, they started doing a review of their operations. Parliament did. I'm glad to see that they're not as corrupt as some of these folks around here, by far, because at least they're willing to talk about it. The operation that was described is what I experienced here, but these, as I described throughout this video, this isn't just MI5. This is CIA JSOC units, federal marshals, obviously they're federal, but you got federal agencies and local entities involved with the community watches and county level DHS. So I'm subject to something for what? After I just laid out, this is an overview of everything. I'm not even talking about all the technology that was used to harass me 24/7. Irradiate you to where you feel like you have a sunburn constantly. Pulse your body to where your like muscles and stuff are twitching, or your heart jerks in your chest like a muscle car engine when you jump on the gas. Yeah, this is exactly what they've been doing. And I remind you, not long ago, a woman recently died around the corner from where I'm currently at. So yeah, they can kill people with this technology. And then there's also remote neural interrupts, where they essentially freeze you if your brain state idles, which I talk about elsewhere. They can essentially freeze, like think of it like freezing up RAM in a computer. That's what it's like. And then when they release the signal, you don't even notice it, but you'll drive out in front of a vehicle that's driving 55 miles an hour, which is what happened to me in Pennsylvania. So in Pennsylvania, I was doing a case and I went to drive. It was all clear moments prior, as far as I was aware. And when I went to drive, the vehicle driving at 55 miles an hour almost hit me on my driver's side. It fishtailed in front of my vehicle. And I was like, where did that vehicle come from? Well, I remember that in, I believe it was late June, early July of 2018, I was outside, smoked a cigarette. My family went inside to play a game. We were playing a game on a tablet. And then they came back outside. And I was like, I thought you were going inside to play the game. We were just playing it for like 20 minutes. I was like, no way. No way. Because I sat there and I relaxed myself for a second. Next thing I know, 20 minutes went by. I was like, there's no way. But yeah, that's the capability of this technology. So they do remote neural interrupts if your mind state relaxes to a point where they can essentially freeze the brain waves that are occurring based on what their system's sensing. And they can induce what looks like an accident on a highway. Like someone drives in front of a semi-truck. Or something more severe, like if they're operating, an aircraft or something. So this is the capability of this technology that they're operating. And I just did a brief overview of a lot of good information as far as like what I'm particularly dealing with and how I still have yet to have been contacted by an agency. So apparently they don't mind these foreign folks. There's no way a lot of these people have a TSSCI clearance. They don't mind them getting this information. And this has been going on for multiple years now. And remember, they did a failed recruitment of me for this little Northwoods Gladio thing in March when I refused to follow their directions. And then I continued to refuse to follow directions in the early May, and then that's when they tried to wipe my memory, which caused me to go to the VA. And then, my sister was hit by a vehicle, and then my two grandmothers died, which I get into in other videos. You're not going to tell me this is a coincidence. So, yeah. Some stuff to think about. So, I'm just doing a quick little update here. Forgot to mention, you know, you got the whole SODARS thing, um, and how that information is used for certain stuff. Well, a lot of the places I've been to, you'll see former British government personnel working as contractors. It's a really big thing in the Middle East and whatnot. But the problem is they're not really contractors. They're working in a military intelligence role unofficially in these countries to gather information on the host nation that they're working for. In addition to gathering information, they also sell military equipment, sell commercial equipment, such as computers. They'll come in and network out the organization that they're working for. But they'll also sell surveillance type of technology, which is, it's an obvious no-brainer, right? GPS trackers, camera systems, cellular technology, satellite technology. But the thing is they'll port that information also back to them. So they're getting copies of it, in addition to, the client getting the information. So a lot of it might seem secure, but it's really not secure, as far as, like, there'll be someone else watching it. And you can never be too sure when you bring in someone from another country that's working for an intelligence service, like what they're going to put in your infrastructure of your organization. And I forgot to talk about that, because at the end of the day, you got to remember what I'm dealing with here in Buffalo, New York is directly related to rogue, and I'm emphasizing rogue, British intelligence service personnel with rogue American intelligence personnel, the intelligence community, rogue intelligence community personnel. So I'm not just going to talk about the SODARs, which these people are going to know, they know about. And like I said before, apparently the agencies don't really care that they know this type of information, which I find really absurd at the end of the day, considering the SODARS itself is secret, no foreign. And again, there's a lot more that goes into the whole SODARS. Political stuff goes in there, like local leaders, who's who in the zoo, local law enforcement. Again, it's all it's a very detailed thing, and nothing is what it seems for the people that are gathering the information that they need to gather. So, a word to the wise for anyone working with people who claim to not be working with an intelligence service, which, it's a no-brainer as well. People with G2 always look at situations like that and know there's always the possibility they're working for a foreign government intelligence service. So I'm just bringing this point up because at the end of the day, this is a rigged police exam. Local corporations, foreign corporations operating and managing things locally, and so forth. And it goes back to, again, Afghanistan in 2012 and 2013 with London fingerprints associated with the activity. And when I say London, I mean British Intelligence Service. So I find it strange that the current administration is working with them, which I'd still work with some of them anyways, because they're not all rogue. But it's almost like a conflict of interest that we would work with the very entity that was targeting one of your persons overseas 8 years ago now. And remember, I EAS from the United States Marine Corps in October 2015. I returned to Buffalo, New York in September 2015, and then I EAS'd again a month later in October 2015. But there was already stuff installed in my residence. And a whole bunch of other shenanigans going on around here. Like somebody intended on targeting me. And it at least goes back to the assessment, and everyone asked me if I wanted to do TFO as early as 2012, but again, it happened again in 2015, and my response was no, each time. Now, I did have other folks other than them approach me. Deals with similar types of operations is what I've been talking about around here with the Gladio Northwoods type of unit. I don't believe they're calling it that. Even though you got Army counterintelligence known as VISPA involved. But I believe they're calling it something else. I don't know the actual name off the top of my head. And so I had folks like that approach me overseas to request knowledge from me. Like, hey, what do you think about this? And the way they were doing things was kind of like, nah, don't do that. Yeah, you know, you're asking for trouble by doing that. Do it like this, yada yada yada. So I was in a leadership position for what I was doing for technical surveillance, but I was also advising third parties that had nothing to do with me on techniques to employ and when not to do human and surveillance tech stuff, and how to mix and mingle, because again, I have a background in human and background in technical surveillance, so as well as, you know, computer stuff, which goes into the whole technical surveillance aspect. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that up, since, you know, this is ultimately some rogue British targeting me with rogue Americans targeting me, which started a long time ago. And I didn't want to leave them out of the awesome FaceTime I'm doing right now. So I guess that'll be it for now. So this will be another update to this video, and how Las Vegas, Sandy Hook is involved with this entity. And also there's the Philadelphia bombing in 2016 associated with this entity. And there's also the recent Georgia shooting that happened in February 2020. They use bird dogging tactics, both in person and over covert radio communications. They have a color scheme that goes along with what they're doing. There's a color pattern to them. They use objects for symbology. They also do symbolism with stickers and stuff like that on their vehicles, and things placed in certain areas, like stickers placed on signs. Another thing I noticed, I'll drive through the city, like in Buffalo here, and there'll be colored tape around poles, certain poles. And as you drive through the city, you'll go from one color group to the next color group. When you hit the end of one color group, you know you have to turn, and you get to a new color group with tape wrapped around poles, and you follow that until you get to a symbol that signals you that it ends, and then you go to the next color group, and you keep doing this over and over again. They like to incorporate with the colors, the color symbology that they use. They like to incorporate hats. I call it the hatting process because that's how it came across to me in 2018 when I was being targeted by them. Edward Snowden recently said something about, I believe it was in September 2019, I believe he said something about them being called the tri-hats. I call it the hatting process. He mentioned something about they'll put the tri-hats on you. If it's what I think he is talking about with this whole Gladio Northwoods unit that's running around targeting people, I believe it's in reference to the color red, white, and blue, the American flag, which goes right directly into the United Nations stuff and the Georgia shooting that happened recently. So I'll just read real quick over what I have noted on my Twitter account. So we have red tags, blue steals. So they either steal property, they'll steal someone's life. They ultimately go to jail, right? Or they end up dead. That's how that works. That's why I said the blue team's the Mickey Mouse trap. So you got red tags, blue steals, green graves, like at the Las Vegas and at the Navy shipyard. Chartreuse color, green, is green graves. White purifies, which is canonized. That was what happened to the Russian ambassador to Turkey in 2016. So in December 2016, if you look at their symbology on the wall, and then there's also the color reference with flowers and everything. And if you read that, it says focus, the person looked at the flowers, canonized them, which was the Russian ambassador to Turkey in December 2016. So after white purifies, we have purple punishes. So purple goes around and punishes people because it's a mix of red and blue. And then orange indicts, which, remember, I said already, blue, you're either going to jail or you're going to end up dead. It might not happen immediately when they use you for one incident, but it will happen. And in another video I did where the individual was being given instructions, he was a blue team member, based on what I know to be true about this organization. The one that was in a local Target store in Buffalo, New York, which I provide the information elsewhere for people to verify it if they want. So blue is used for Mickey Mouse. They might be directed to do certain things and get away with it, but eventually they might be used for something where they're set up for an agenda. That's where the Mickey Mouse trap comes in. And again, that goes into the slideshow that I put together where I show the surveillance tradecraft, what appeared to be surveillance tradecraft in October 2017, which was a few weeks after the Las Vegas incident, and they had Las Vegas information coded into their surveillance tradecraft. So again, the tri-hats, which is what Edward Snowden mentions, I believe is the hatting process is what I call it, based on what they were trying to get me to switch up colors of my hats. So there was red, white, and blue. It goes into the whole red, white, and blue, the American flag. Just like Edward Snowden talked about, where they'll roll out the intelligence agencies against you, but they'll also roll out those tri-hats to threaten and harass you and everything else like that. He doesn't talk about how people are used to go around and covertly murder people or clandestinely murder people, but they do it. Some of it they do covertly, based on what I know this technology is capable of, inducing heart attacks in people or remote neural interrupts, so that you get into a vehicle accident with a semi-truck or get sideswiped by a vehicle at 55 miles an hour. So that's the covert part of it. And the fact that they're given instructions over the covert radio communications to act like they're not associated with it. So again, I would listen to an earlier part in this audio recording where I discuss my email being routed overseas and the locations where it went to and the entities involved, because this isn't a coincidence that all this unrolled like this against me. And pretty much everyone's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, yeah, you can only claim deniability for so long before you just totally discredit yourself, which, I've heard many comments out there recently with the intelligence community's discredited itself, but that goes into other stuff as well with the dossier and how it was bogus. Like the P-Gate part of dossier is a reference to Diego Garcia, the Russian hotel. And then there's other references to other stuff. It was a counterintelligence, counterterrorism operational trap based on what I was able to code since 2014, not 2016, which is what everyone's led to believe, which goes back into the stuff that I've been talking about, conveniently, right? Yeah. So that'll be it for now.